Katherine was an exceptionally intelligent and curious child from a very young age. Her thirst for knowledge was insatiable, and she would often ask questions about everything she saw or heard. As she approached adolescence, Katherine's physical development accelerated rapidly. By the time she was 18 years old, she had already matured physically, possessing a womanly figure that belied her tender age. Katherine's parents, though well-intentioned, were remarkably lax in monitoring their daughter's exposure to mature themes. They would often leave her alone to watch home movies, many of which featured romantic scenes and intimate moments between couples. Unbeknownst to her parents, Katherine became increasingly fascinated with these scenes, and she would often find herself drawn to the sensual and emotional connections depicted on screen. As a result of her premature exposure to mature content, Katherine's curiosity soon turned into recklessness. At the tender age, she had already begun exploring her own sexuality, engaging in precocious relationships with boys her age. Her parents were nonchalant about her welfare and never had time to train her through morals. As she was getting older by age, she was too exposed and was more intentional than ever, with different married women coming to her parents to report how she flirted with their husbands. The parents of Katherine were becoming tired with the day-to-day issues of their daughter. On this faithful day, a young handsome man who came from a bigger city started developing feelings for Katherine. Bola never thought of studying the lady he is about to get into a relationship with. Instead, he was carried away by her beauty and her charisma, so he quickly went ahead to meet the parents of Katherine, asking for her hand in marriage. Her parents were so excited that finally someone is going to take away this burden from them. Unknown to them that they are about to see the worst of their daughter. As Katherine's wedding day approached, her parents were overjoyed, thinking they had finally found a suitable husband to tame their rebellious daughter. But little did they know, Katherine's bad behaviors would soon destroy her marriage. Her husband, a strong and handsome man, tried his best to satisfy Katherine's insatiable desires, but she was relentless. She seduced every strong man in the community, leaving a trail of broken relationships and shattered reputations in her wake. As her addiction intensified, Katherine turned to living things, seeking satisfaction from animals. But even that couldn't quench her thirst. One day, while visiting the market, she laid eyes on the king's majestic horse. Its sheer size and strength captivated her, and she became obsessed with the idea of possessing it. Katherine traveled far and wide, searching for a giant horse to call her own. Finally, she found a magnificent black stallion, which she brought back to her home. She began training the horse, teaching it to respond to her seductive advances. The day of reckoning arrived when Katherine stimulated the horse to have it with her. The experience was excruciatingly painful, but she was determined to make it work. As she struggled to cope with the horse's immense power, she became convinced that she had finally found the solution to her addiction. But fate had other plans. One fateful day, the horse, angry and hungry, turned on Katherine. As she tried to seduce it, the horse forcefully penetrated her, leaving her screaming in agony. Her private parts were severely damaged, and she was left bleeding profusely. As the hours ticked by, Katherine's cries for help went unanswered. Her neighbors, who had grown wary of her antics, ignored her pleas. It wasn't until evening, when they noticed an eerie silence emanating from her house, that they decided to investigate. What they found was a scene from a horror movie. Blood was splattered everywhere, and Katherine lay motionless on the floor. They rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late. The damage was irreparable, and Katherine's life hung in the balance. As the doctors fought to save her, Katherine's parents were consumed by grief and guilt. They realized too late that their careless handling of Katherine's addiction had led to this tragic outcome. But would Katherine survive? Would she find redemption, or would her addiction ultimately prove fatal? The journey ahead would be long and arduous, filled with twists and turns that would keep everyone on the edge of their seats. Katherine's parents were beside themselves with worry as they waited for news from the doctors. The hours ticked by at a glacial pace, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, the doctor emerged, his face somber. "Katherine's condition is critical," he announced. "The damage to her reproductive organs is extensive, and we're not sure if she'll ever be able to bear children. But our primary concern right now is saving her life." Katherine's parents were devastated. They had never imagined that their daughter's addiction would lead to such catastrophic consequences. As they prayed for her recovery, Katherine lay in her hospital bed, fighting for her life. The road to recovery was long and arduous. Katherine underwent multiple surgeries, each one a painful and grueling ordeal. She suffered from intense physical pain, as well as emotional trauma. The guilt and shame of her past actions haunted her, making it difficult for her to sleep at night. Despite the challenges, Katherine was determined to overcome her addiction. She began attending therapy sessions, where she confronted the underlying issues that had driven her behavior. She also joined a support group, where she met others who struggled with similar addictions. With time, Katherine slowly began to heal. She learned to forgive herself and let go of the guilt and shame that had weighed her down. She discovered a new sense of purpose and meaning, and began to rebuild her life. But just as Katherine was starting to make progress, she faced a new challenge. The physical damage to her reproductive organs had left her infertile, and she was forced to confront the reality that she might never be able to have children. The emotional pain was intense, and Katherine struggled to come to terms with this new reality. As Katherine navigated this difficult terrain, she began to realize that her journey to recovery was far from over. She had faced the physical consequences of her addiction, but the emotional and psychological scars still lingered. Would she ever be able to fully heal and move on from her past? The journey ahead would be long and uncertain, but Katherine was determined to persevere. As Katherine continued on her journey to recovery, she faced numerous challenges. She struggled to come to terms with her infertility, and the emotional pain lingered. Despite these difficulties, Katherine remained determined to rebuild her life. She began to focus on her career, pouring her energy into her work. She also started volunteering at a local charity, helping others who struggled with addiction. Through her volunteer work, Katherine found a new sense of purpose and meaning. However, Katherine's past eventually caught up with her. Her years of reckless behavior had taken a toll on her health. She had never practiced safe sex, and as a result, she had exposed herself to numerous STDs. One fateful day, Katherine received a devastating diagnosis. She had contracted a dangerous disease which has no cure. The news was a crushing blow, and Katherine felt like her world had come crashing down around her. She was overcome with grief, guilt, and shame. She couldn't help but think about all the reckless decisions she had made in the past. She wondered how she would ever be able to live with this disease, and how it would impact her future. As Katherine struggled to come to terms with her diagnosis, she realized that she had a long and difficult road ahead of her. She would have to undergo treatment, take medication, and make significant lifestyle changes. Despite the challenges, Katherine remained determined to fight. She began treatment, and slowly but surely, she started to rebuild her life. She learned to manage her condition, and she found a new sense of purpose in helping others who struggled with the deadly diseases. Katherine's journey was far from easy, but she refused to give up. She continued to fight, and in doing so, she found a new sense of strength and resilience. As time went on, Katherine's health began to decline. Despite her best efforts, the disease had progressed, and she was now suffering from a higher one. She was in and out of the hospital, undergoing treatment and battling opportunistic infections. Her parents, who had once been so careless and neglectful, were now by her side, caring for her and trying to make amends for their past mistakes. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and Katherine's life was slipping away. As Katherine lay in her hospital bed, she couldn't help but think about the role her parents had played in destroying her life. Their neglect, their carelessness, and their failure to provide her with the guidance and support she needed had all contributed to her downfall. She remembered the way they had ignored her recklessness, the way they had dismissed her addiction as a phase. She remembered the way they had failed to provide her with the love, support, and structure she needed to thrive. Katherine's parents were filled with regret and grief as they watched their daughter slip away. They realized too late that their actions, or lack thereof, had contributed to her tragic fate. One day, surrounded by her parents and loved ones, Katherine took her last breath. Her life, which had been marked by struggle, pain, and regret, was finally at an end. As her parents mourned the loss of their beloved daughter, they couldn't help but wonder what they could have done differently. They realized that their carelessness and neglect had ultimately led to Katherine's demise, and that knowledge would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Katherine's story serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of parental responsibility and the devastating consequences of neglect and carelessness. It highlights the need for parents to be proactive, supportive, and guidance-oriented in their children's lives, lest they suffer the same tragic fate as Katherine. What a story to learn from! Share with us in the comments section on what you learn from a story of this magnitude. And if you are just joining us for the first time, kindly hit the subscribe button to give me a follow. Like my video and share this video to as many people as possible. See you in my next episode.